I set out for a weekend hike in the woods, hoping to clear my head. It had been a tough couple of weeks at work, and I figured some time alone in nature would do me good. The weather was perfect, cool but not cold. The sun just starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows over the trail. There was something peaceful about the rhythm of my steps, the crunch of dried leaves underfoot, and the quiet hum of the forest around me. The kind of quiet that lets your mind wander but also makes you feel like you're part of something bigger. I wasn't too far from the trailhead. I'd passed a few hikers earlier, and then I was alone, which I liked. It gave me time to think, time to breathe. The path I was on was well-worn, leading through a dense forest of pines and hardwoods. The trail twisted and turned, cutting through patches of thick underbrush, and I followed it without much thought. There was no rush. I figured I'd go a few miles, set up camp, and spend the night. The thought of sitting by a fire, watching the nightfall, sounded good. The solitude was something I craved. A few hours into the hike, the sun dipped lower, and the light started to fade. I thought about pulling out my flashlight, but I decided I didn't need it just yet. The trail was still visible enough, and I could see the outlines of the trees ahead. The temperature had dropped a little too, but nothing too drastic. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and kept walking. As the forest deepened, the trail became less distinct. The trees grew thicker, and the underbrush started closing in. I had been in these woods before, so I wasn't too concerned. But something felt off. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the woods were growing quieter. The usual rustling of small animals, the call of birds, the wind in the branches. Everything seemed muted, distant. I stopped for a moment to take a drink from my water bottle and listen. The silence was almost unnerving now. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a kind of weight in the air, as if something was watching me. I looked around, but the woods were still. There was no sign of movement, no breeze. I shook it off. Maybe I was just tired. I'd been on the move all day after all. I started walking again, a little faster this time, trying to shake the feeling that had crept up on me. The trail seemed to go on forever. It was longer than I remembered, and the trees were starting to feel too close. The canopy above blocked out more of the sky, and the shadows seemed deeper now. The woods weren't friendly anymore. They felt like they were pressing in on me, almost suffocating. I looked at my watch. It was almost dark now, the sun long gone, the sky barely visible through the thick branches. I figured I should find a spot to camp. There were a few clearings around, but they all felt wrong, like they were too exposed. I wasn't paranoid, but I trusted my instincts, and something about this place didn't sit right. I pressed on, hoping to find a better spot. That's when I noticed the trail starting to fade. The dirt path had all but disappeared, and I was now walking through thick, tangled underbrush. Branches scraped against my arms, and the ground was uneven, littered with rocks and roots. I stopped and looked around, trying to get my bearings. There was no sign of the trail anymore, just a wall of trees and thick bushes. I turned back, but it didn't feel right. The way the woods stretched out behind me seemed different now, like the path had changed. It was hard to explain, but something was off. I had hiked this area before, and it wasn't supposed to be like this. The woods were familiar, but they felt alien now. I was no longer sure where I was or which direction I'd come from. I pulled out my map and looked at it, but it didn't help. The map was old. The trails marked on it weren't matching up with what I was seeing, and there were no landmarks in sight. I couldn't even see the trailhead or any signs of where the main path had gone. I knew I needed to stay calm, but my heart started to race. The woods, once a place of comfort, now felt like a maze, a trap. I kept walking, hoping I'd find something that would give me a clue about where I was. The sky had darkened fully now, and the stars were barely visible through the canopy. I was relying more and more on the beam of my flashlight, but it felt like the light wasn't cutting through the darkness as much as it should. The shadows seemed to stretch, grow, and move, and then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the woods. It was faint at first, almost a whisper, but then it grew louder, a rustling like something moving through the underbrush, or maybe just behind the trees. My breath caught in my throat. The noise stopped, I stood still, waiting. My heart was pounding now. I turned off the flashlight, hoping to hear better. The forest was still, save for the occasional snap of a twig, but the silence felt too thick. There was a presence in the woods, and it was not friendly. I didn't wait any longer. I started walking faster, not caring about the trail anymore. I just needed to get out, get back to the familiar, to where I could see the sky. But no matter how fast I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was close, that something was following me. I stumbled through the underbrush, tripping over roots and branches, trying to keep my breathing steady. My flashlight flickered, then went out entirely. I cursed under my breath, trying to get it back on, but it was useless. I kept walking, using the little light left in the woods to guide me, but every step seemed to take me further away from anything recognizable. Suddenly, I heard the snap of a branch just ahead of me. It was so loud, so close, it felt like something was just a few feet away. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there, something big, moving just out of sight. I took a step back, but that's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of heavy breathing, ragged, like something large and exhausted. I didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling in my gut that I didn't want to find out. I turned and ran. I didn't care where, just away from that sound. I crashed through the woods, branches slapping at my face, the ground uneven beneath me. I ran until my legs burned, until my lungs felt like they might burst. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, the woods started to thin out. The trees weren't as dense, and I could see the faint outline of a clearing ahead. I pushed forward, my breath ragged, heart pounding, but there was something else. A light, a distant glow. I kept running towards it, not thinking, just moving. The light grew brighter as I approached, and soon I saw it. An old cabin, a small one, sitting at the edge of the woods. It wasn't much, but it was a place, something solid. I ran up to it and yanked open the door, nearly falling inside. I slammed it shut behind me, pressing my back against it, trying to steady my breath. I didn't know what had been following me, but I had no intention of finding out. The night passed in a blur, the only sound the occasional creak of the cabin and the wind outside. I didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows moving just beyond the cabin walls, felt the weight of the forest pressing in. Morning came, and with it, a kind of clarity. The cabin, though old and run down, was safe. I gathered my things, trying not to look back at the dark woods behind me. I didn't care if I'd gone off trail, or if I'd gotten lost. I was out now, and I wasn't going back in there. When I finally made it back to my car, I didn't look at the map again. I didn't need to. I had learned something that night. The woods might seem peaceful, might seem like a place to escape, but they could change in an instant. And sometimes the peace they offer comes with a price. As I drove away, the thought of those woods still clung to me, like a shadow that wouldn't let go. But I was alive, and that's what mattered. I was alive. It was late in the afternoon when I realized I had taken the wrong trail. The path I was on seemed unfamiliar, and the sun was starting to set. I pulled out my map, trying to get my bearings, but the trail markers didn't match up with what I was seeing. The trees were growing thicker, and the underbrush was dense, making it hard to move quickly. I tried to backtrack, but every direction seemed to lead me deeper into the woods. That's when I heard it. A soft, eerie cry, like the sound of a child calling for help. My stomach dropped, and I hesitated. I knew I shouldn't follow it, but something pulled me forward. At first, I tried to dismiss it, thinking it was just the wind or an animal. The forest around me was full of strange sounds, distant bird calls, the rustling of leaves, and the occasional snap of a twig. But this was different. It was a voice, a child's voice, faint and fragile, as if calling out from deep within the trees. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the longer I stood there, the more the voice seemed to tug at something inside me. I took a few steps forward, my boots crunching on the dry leaves beneath me. The light was fading fast, and the shadows from the towering trees grew longer, stretching out like dark fingers reaching for me. I didn't like the idea of being out here after dark. The woods were thick and disorienting, and there was no telling what creatures might come out when the sun dipped below the horizon. But the cry, it was so real, so urgent. My instincts told me I needed to find it, to make sure no one was in trouble. As I moved deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around me. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting wood. The underbrush was a tangled mess of brambles, fallen branches, and thick vines, slowing my progress. I had to push through, each step feeling like I was wading through an impenetrable wall of greenery. My heart was pounding in my chest, the sound of it drowning out everything else, but the voice continued to echo in the distance. "I'm lost. Please help." It was softer now, like it was coming from a place just beyond my reach. I quickened my pace, the weight of the growing darkness pressing on me. It was hard to breathe as I forced my way through the brush, my arms scratched by thorns and leaves. But I couldn't stop. Not now. The voice was getting closer, more desperate. When I finally emerged into a small clearing, I froze. There, in the center of the clearing, was a doll. A small, tattered thing, its fabric faded and torn, its eyes hollow and dark. It lay on the ground as if dropped carelessly, one arm bent at an odd angle, its body sprawled out at an unnatural tilt. My stomach lurched at the sight of it. Felt wrong, out of place, like a warning. But the voice, God, the voice was louder now. It was just behind me, close enough that I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "I'm lost too." The voice was right there, so close. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I spun around, but there was nothing, no one, just the forest, dense and still, holding its breath. My pulse was racing, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. The doll, the voice, everything, nothing made sense. Was it some sort of trap? Had someone placed the doll there to lure me in, to make me follow the sound? My hands trembled as I reached for the doll, still lying on the ground, feeling an undeniable urge to pick it up. I couldn't explain why. It was like the voice had pulled me here, drawn me to it. The moment my fingers brushed the doll's worn fabric, the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't just a cry. It was a whisper, low and insistent, like it was in my ear, urging me to listen. "I'm lost too. Help me, please." The words sent a chill through my spine. I could hear the desperation in the voice now. It sounded so real, so human. But how? Who could be out here in the woods, alone and calling for help? No one should be this deep in the forest at this hour. My mind raced. I wanted to call out, to shout, to ask if anyone was there. But I couldn't. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. I felt like I was being watched. I stood frozen for a few moments, staring at the doll in my hand. My heart was pounding, and my breath was shallow. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to leave this place and never look back. But something, some inexplicable force, kept me rooted to the spot. The voice, the doll, the overwhelming sense of being caught in something I couldn't quite understand. It all felt wrong, but at the same time, it felt like I needed to do something. I couldn't leave without knowing what was going on. The voice came again, but this time it was closer, almost too close, as if someone were standing right behind me, their breath hot on my neck. "Help me." I dropped the doll. In that moment, the world seemed to tilt. I heard the sound of rustling leaves, the snap of a twig underfoot, and my heart skipped a beat. Someone or something was out there. I couldn't see them, couldn't hear them moving, but I felt them. I felt their presence in the air around me, heavy and suffocating. Panic surged through me, and without thinking, I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. I pushed through the thick underbrush, the branches scratching at my face and arms. My feet caught on roots, sending me stumbling and falling. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The voice, that horrible, pleading voice, still echoed in my mind, urging me forward, as if trying to drag me back to the clearing. As I ran, the forest seemed to shift around me. The trees were taller now, the ground uneven, and the path was all but gone. It was like I was running in circles, lost in a maze with no way out. The light was nearly gone, the sky fading to an ominous dark blue, and I could feel the weight of the night creeping in. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound seemed to be a threat. I was surrounded by darkness, trapped in the woods with no clear way back. It wasn't until I stumbled over a rock and nearly twisted my ankle that I stopped, panting, my heart hammering in my chest. I looked around, disoriented, trying to catch my breath. I had to think. I had to find the trail. I reached for my map again, but my hands were shaking so badly that I could hardly hold it. I cursed under my breath and stuffed it back into my pocket, not caring about the map anymore. I just needed to get out. That's when I heard it again. The voice. So close, so close. It felt like it was right behind me, whispering in my ear. I'm lost. Please help. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran again, faster this time, not stopping to think, just moving on pure instinct. I heard my breath coming in ragged gasps, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves beneath me. I could feel the coldness of the night closing in, the chill creeping through my clothes and settling in my bones. I ran until my legs burned, until I thought I couldn't go any further. Then suddenly, I burst into a small clearing, one that I recognized. The trail. My trail. It was there, just ahead, the familiar markings of the path that I had strayed so far from. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't dare. I pushed myself forward, onto the trail, feeling a surge of relief wash over me. The voice, that whispering plea for help, faded away as I stepped into the clearing, as if the forest itself had released me. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the woods, where the first faint light of a distant street lamp glowed in the distance. I could hear the hum of traffic, the world outside the woods, calling me back. I made it. I was safe. The woods had let me go. But even as I walked back to my car, even as I left the forest behind, I could still hear the voice. Faint, distant, like a memory I couldn't shake. I'm lost. And I knew, deep down, that I would never forget the feeling of being lost in the woods. Not just lost in the physical sense, but lost in something darker, something I couldn't explain. Something that would stay with me, always, in the corners of my mind, no matter how far I ran. I'd been hiking for hours, the path under my boots winding through dense woods. The forest was thick, the trees towering above me with their twisted branches stretching out like crooked fingers. I'd been following the old trail for what seemed like forever, a barely visible path left by people long gone. My legs ached, and my throat felt dry, but I pushed on. There was a sense of peace in the woods, broken only by the occasional sound of birds in the distance and the crunch of leaves underfoot. It was one of those days where time seemed to stretch out, and I didn't really have anywhere to be, nowhere to rush off to. I could just be here, in the woods, lost in my own thoughts. The deeper I walked, the more the world seemed to fall away. The usual sounds of wildlife, the scurrying of small animals and the chirps of birds, started to fade. Everything felt oddly still, as though the woods were holding their breath. I didn't think too much of it at first. After all, the forest was quiet sometimes, especially when you got off the beaten path, which I was now well off. I kept walking, the trail narrowing and disappearing under the blanket of fallen leaves. It was here that I came across a small hollow, tucked between the trees like a secret hidden away. At first, I thought it was just another part of the woods, but as I stepped into the clearing, I felt something. It wasn't anything tangible, nothing I could put my finger on, but there was a weight to the air, a pressure that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The trees around me seemed to form an almost perfect circle, their trunks thick and close together. The ground in the middle was covered in thick moss, soft and spongy underfoot. It looked like the perfect spot to rest. My legs were sore from the hike, and the stillness of the hollow seemed inviting. I spotted a large, smooth rock sitting at the edge of the moss and made my way over to it. The rock was cool to the touch, but I didn't mind. I sat down, taking a deep breath and looking up at the canopy above. The leaves filtered the light in a way that made everything seem dimmer, like the sun was only a suggestion, not something that could really reach this part of the woods. The world felt isolated here, not the usual calm isolation you get in the wilderness, but something heavier, something that seemed to press in on you from all sides. I wasn't sure how long I'd been sitting there when I noticed something odd. I looked down at the rock beneath me, and that's when I saw it, small, hand-carved symbols etched into the stone. At first, I thought they were just natural markings, cracks in the rock, maybe even some sort of weathering. But as I looked closer, I realized the lines were too deliberate, too precise. They weren't random. They looked like someone had taken the time to carve them, each symbol with sharp, clean edges, as if done recently. Curious, I ran my fingers over them. The moment my skin made contact with the symbols, a cold gust of wind rushed through the trees. It was sudden and sharp, like a jolt, and it rattled the branches above me, sending a shiver down my spine. The air around me grew colder, and I pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders. The stillness that had hung over the woods was gone, replaced by something else, something heavier. The wind picked up, swirling around me, tugging at my clothes, making the branches creak in ways that felt unnatural, like they were protesting the intrusion. That's when I heard it, a low growl coming from somewhere deep in the woods. It wasn't a sound I could easily place, too low, too guttural to be a bear or any other animal I'd encountered. It sent a chill down my spine, and my heart rate kicked up a notch. I stood up quickly, instinctively looking around, my eyes darting between the trees, searching for whatever made the noise. The growl had an edge to it, like it was a warning. Something wasn't right. I turned to leave, but as I took a step toward the path, I heard something else, a rustling in the underbrush, just beyond the reach of the trees. It sounded like something moving quickly, its movements sharp and calculated, not the usual rustle of a small animal. This was different. My stomach dropped. I quickened my pace, stepping off the rock and heading back toward the narrow trail that would lead me out of this strange hollow. But as I moved, the sound followed. Footsteps, soft but unmistakable, matched my pace as I quickened it. I didn't dare turn around to look, but I could feel it, whatever it was, closing in on me. The sound was unmistakable now. Someone or something was following me. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed myself harder, trying to stay calm. I wasn't sure what I thought was following me, but I knew I didn't want to find out. My steps grew faster, the forest flashing by in a blur of green and brown. I didn't dare look back, not even once. I focused on the trail ahead, my mind racing. My breath was coming in short, panicked bursts, my legs burning with the effort to keep moving. The sound of something following me grew louder, closer, its pace matching mine, getting faster with every step I took. My skin prickled with the certainty that whatever it was had to be just behind me now. The underbrush rustled violently, the sound of heavy feet crashing through the forest floor, and I could almost hear the breath, low and ragged, as if something was just waiting to pounce. I didn't know how long I ran, how far I'd gone. My legs were burning, my chest tight from the effort, but I pushed myself, my thoughts a mess of fear and adrenaline. Finally, I saw it, the edge of the woods, the familiar outline of the trailhead where I had entered. I could see the faint light filtering through the trees at the edge of the forest. I was almost there, almost out, but just as I thought I was free, just as I reached the last stretch of the trail, I felt it, a sharp tug on the back of my shirt. It was as if something had grabbed me, yanked me backward with a force that nearly knocked me off my feet. I stumbled, my heart slamming against my ribs as I turned, but there was nothing, no one. The woods were silent again, eerily so. I stood there for a moment, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my eyes scanning the woods. Nothing moved. The underbrush was still, but I knew, I felt it. Something had been following me. Something had been close enough to reach out and grab me, but now it was gone, gone. Like a bad dream fading away at the first light of day. I didn't stick around to figure out what had happened. I ran the rest of the way back to my car, my legs trembling, my mind racing with the images of the symbols on the rock, the strange growl, and the sense of being watched. As I drove away, the woods seemed to stretch on behind me, dark and silent, hiding whatever it was that lurked in their depths. I never went near that hollow again. It was the last time I'd venture off the beaten path in that part of the woods. Some things, I realized, are better left unexplored. And some places, once you've seen what lies hidden beneath the surface, should be avoided altogether. I had been hiking for hours, moving deeper into the forest, far away from any kind of civilization. The trees around me were thick and the air heavy, thick with the smell of pine needles and earth. I liked it like that, far from the noise of people, the busy roads, and the constant hum of life. The quiet of the woods was something I could never get enough of, and I'd been planning this solo camping trip for weeks. I didn't mind the solitude. In fact, I embraced it. The world felt simpler out here. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. I was about an hour away from where I had planned to set up camp. I had picked a spot by a creek, but there was still plenty of daylight left to enjoy a little more of the forest before I settled in. It wasn't a long hike, just a few miles, but it was enough to feel removed from everything I knew. As I walked, I noticed something strange. In the distance, through the trees, there was a flickering light. I squinted, trying to make it out. At first, I thought it might be some kind of hunter or another camper, someone who had set up a fire, but something about it didn't sit right with me. The light was too steady, too still, as if it had been there for a while. And then there was the fact that I hadn't passed anyone on the trail. Not a single person. I stopped in my tracks, my curiosity getting the better of me. The fire wasn't too far off, so I figured I could at least walk over and say hello. Maybe it was just another solo hiker like me. Maybe they were cooking dinner or winding down for the night. I followed the flickering glow, stepping carefully over the underbrush, the crunch of leaves beneath my boots the only sound breaking the silence. As I moved closer, I could make out more details, the crackling of the fire, the faint scent of burning wood in the air. But as I got closer, something started to feel off. The closer I got, the more wrong it seemed. The fire was blazing in the middle of a small clearing, but the person sitting by it didn't move. They didn't even seem to acknowledge the light. I stopped a few dozen feet away, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was sitting cross-legged, their back to me, staring into the flames. They were motionless, completely still, not a twitch or a shift in posture. Their clothes were ragged, torn in places and covered in dirt. The pale glow of the fire flickered across their face, and I could see their eyes, wide open, unblinking, fixed firmly on the fire. There was something deeply unsettling about their gaze. It was as though they weren't looking at the flames at all, but through them into something else entirely. "Hey!" I called out, my voice breaking through the stillness of the forest. My words seemed to vanish into the air, swallowed by the woods around us. There was no response. I stepped forward cautiously, unsure of whether to approach or just turn around and leave. But my curiosity was stronger than my sense of caution. I took another few steps, getting closer. My footsteps were soft on the earth, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the person had heard me, that they were somehow aware of my presence, even though they didn't react. I called out again, a little louder this time, but still nothing. The figure didn't move. Now, only a few feet away, I could see more details. Their skin looked unnaturally pale, almost ghostly in the firelight. Dirt and grime were caked into their clothes and their skin, their face marked by scratches and cuts that looked fresh. Their hair was tangled and wild, as if they hadn't bothered to care for themselves in days, maybe even weeks. The smell of the dirt and sweat hit me all at once. It was strong, almost pungent, but it wasn't the smell that disturbed me the most. It was the feeling, the overwhelming feeling that something wasn't right about this situation. I took another step forward, my breath catching in my throat. I don't know why I didn't turn around then. Maybe I was too invested in finding out who this person was, or maybe I just couldn't bring myself to believe that something was wrong. But as I got within a few feet, it hit me. There was something deeply wrong about them. Their skin wasn't just pale, It was sickly, almost translucent in the firelight. It was as if they hadn't seen the sun in years, or like they had been trapped in the woods for so long that they had lost all semblance of humanity. There was a thin layer of sweat on their face, and the cuts on their skin looked infected, swollen, and angry. I couldn't help but stare at them for a moment, frozen. My heart rate quickened, but I still hadn't turned around. It was like some part of me was trying to understand what was happening, even as the rational side of my brain told me that I should be anywhere but here. My stomach churned, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I realized something else. Something even worse. The person wasn't blinking. They weren't moving, and they weren't blinking. Their eyes were wide open, fixed, staring into the fire without any sign of life behind them. There was no warmth in their gaze, no sign of thought. It was like they were a shell, an empty vessel with no mind inside. I felt the sudden urge to get away, to leave before something worse happened. But as I turned, trying to pull myself away from the eerie scene, I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, but clear enough to freeze me in my tracks. "You shouldn't have come." My breath caught in my throat, and I snapped my head back around, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure hadn't moved. They were still sitting there, staring into the fire, but that whisper, those words, had come from them. I couldn't explain how, but I knew it had. I didn't wait. I didn't think about it. My feet moved before my brain could catch up, and I broke into a sprint. I ran as fast as I could, pushing through the underbrush, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind was racing, filled with a mix of terror and confusion. Why hadn't they moved? Why didn't they answer me? What did they mean by those words? I didn't stop running until I was back at my camp. I didn't even look back. I could feel my breath coming in ragged gasps as I reached my tent, throwing myself inside. I zipped it shut, the sound of the fabric echoing in the quiet of the forest. I lay there, wide awake, listening to the night. The sounds of the forest were all around me. The rustling of leaves, the chirping of insects, the occasional hoot of an owl. But there was something else now, something that hadn't been there before. A feeling like a weight on my chest, pressing down on me. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something. Couldn't sleep, not for hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that person, sitting there by the fire, eyes wide open, unblinking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back to my camp, something dark and lingering, something I couldn't see but knew was there. The night dragged on, each minute stretching into an eternity. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the trees, I knew I had to leave. I packed up my gear quickly, trying not to make any noise, trying not to disturb whatever was in the woods with me. I didn't stay to find out who that person was or why they had been there. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to get out of there. I hit the trail as soon as I could. My footsteps hurried but steady. As I walked, I tried to tell myself that it was just a strange encounter. Maybe someone who had lost their way or was out here for some kind of reason I couldn't understand. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just the figure by the fire. It was the feeling, the sense that something had been watching me from the moment I stepped into that clearing. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't want to seem crazy, but I've never gone back to that forest. I don't even hike in that area anymore. Every time I think about it, I hear that whisper again, soft, barely audible, but clear in my mind. You shouldn't have come. And now, I never go anywhere alone in the woods without knowing exactly who I'll find there. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. Just me and a couple of friends, heading into the woods for a weekend camping trip. We chose a spot a few miles off the nearest trail, hoping to escape the crowds and get a real taste of the wilderness. After setting up our tents, we spent the afternoon lounging around the campfire, telling stories, laughing, and enjoying the peace of being in nature. The evening stretched out in front of us like an endless calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The air was still, the kind of stillness that fills your ears with that odd ringing sensation. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me or just the deep quiet of the woods, but I felt an urge to break the silence, to stretch my legs, and explore the surrounding forest a little. I told my friends I was going to wander off for a bit and set off in the direction opposite of where we had set up camp, down a narrow, overgrown path. The forest around me was thick with trees, pines, oaks, and a few maples scattered in between. I took my time, admiring the sounds of the forest, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze, the occasional scurry of a small animal in the underbrush. It wasn't long before I came across something odd. Just off the path, not far from where the trees grew thicker, I saw a clearing up ahead. I approached cautiously, my curiosity piqued. What I found stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a campsite. At first glance, I assumed it must have been an abandoned site, maybe left behind by hikers or campers who had come before us. But the closer I got, the stranger it seemed. The fire pit was cold, but the logs around it had been disturbed. Some were knocked over, others scattered around like they had been tossed aside in a hurry. There was no sign of any recent activity. No warm embers, no smoke in the air, just the damp chill of the evening setting in. What caught my attention even more was the camp chairs. They were still upright, positioned around the fire pit, exactly where you would expect them to be if people had been sitting around talking not long ago. But something about the scene felt wrong. It didn't look like someone had just left casually. No, it looked like they had been in a rush, like something had made them leave fast. I took a few tentative steps forward, my eyes scanning the surroundings. That's when I saw it. A shirt, torn and bloodstained, hanging from one of the lower branches of a tree. The shirt was a dark red, almost brown from the blood that had dried on it. It looked like it had been torn off in a hurry, and the way it fluttered lightly in the breeze gave the whole scene an unsettling quality. My stomach turned as I stood there, staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I should have turned back then. I knew that, but something in me, something that had always been curious and sometimes reckless, pushed me forward. I moved closer to the campsite, walking cautiously now, as if afraid that somehow, just by stepping into the area, I might disturb something that shouldn't be disturbed. The air felt thicker here, colder, as if the trees themselves were watching me. I knelt beside the fire pit, running my fingers along the cold stones that had been scattered around. My eyes kept darting to the shirt hanging from the tree, as if expecting it to move, expecting it to mean something more than just a piece of discarded clothing. Then I noticed something else, broken branches. The kind of breakage you see when someone or something crashes through the underbrush, pushing aside whatever's in the way without care. I stood up quickly and scanned the ground. There were footprints, muddy, uneven, as if someone had been running or stumbling through the forest. The tracks led off into the trees, disappearing into the thick woods. A chill ran down my spine, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something wasn't right. I took a few steps back, my gaze following the trail of footprints, and then, there it was, a trail of blood. It wasn't much, just a few drops here and there, but it was enough to make my stomach lurch. Whoever had been here had been hurt. The blood led into the woods, deeper and deeper, and the closer I got to it, the more intense the feeling of unease grew. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I was definitely not alone. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. A sound, subtle at first, but unmistakable. A rustling noise, like something, or someone, was moving through the brush behind me. I whirled around, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there. Just the trees, the darkness, and the cold silence of the woods. I stood still for a long moment, trying to calm my breathing, trying to shake off the feeling that someone was watching me. The longer I stood there, the more I became convinced that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just the rustling I had heard. It was the way the woods felt, the way the air seemed to grow colder, thicker, as if something had changed, as if I had crossed a line I shouldn't have. My legs felt like lead as I turned around to leave, but something stopped me, a faint movement out of the corner of my eye. I snapped my head back, but the moment I did, there was nothing, just the trees swaying gently in the wind. But I knew something was there. The hairs on my neck prickled, and I felt it again, those eyes on me, staring at me from the shadows, just out of sight. I couldn't take it anymore. Panic set in, surging through me in an instant. I turned and ran. I didn't care about being quiet or stealthy anymore. I didn't care about looking for my friends or making sense of what I had found. All that mattered was getting back to camp. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees closing in around me, and I could feel the eyes following me, the presence lurking just behind me. I burst through the underbrush, my heart racing, my breath ragged in my chest. I didn't stop running until I saw the glow of our campfire up ahead, my friends sitting around it, oblivious to the panic I felt. I staggered into camp, gasping for air, my hands shaking. My friends looked at me, confused, asking if I was okay, but all I could do was nod, unable to speak. I didn't want to scare them, didn't want to tell them about the shirt, the blood, the trail leading into the forest. It sounded too crazy, even to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me in the woods. I didn't sleep that night. Every crackling branch, every gust of wind, made me jump. Every sound outside the camp made me tense up, my mind racing with images of what I had seen, what I might have seen. We packed up early the next morning. None of us spoke about it, but none of us were eager to stay. We didn't go back to check the campsite to figure out what had happened, and part of me was grateful for that. Some things are better left unexplored, and I had no desire to uncover more. We left the woods without a word about the events of the previous night, but the image of that abandoned campsite, the blood, and the shirt hung from the tree stayed with me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The trail of blood that led deeper into the woods. It had to lead somewhere, but I would never know where, and in a way I was okay with that. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. We never spoke about it again, and after a few weeks, I convinced myself that it was just a strange, unsettling experience. But deep down, I knew that something had happened out there, something that was never meant to be found. And the thought of it, whatever it was, still lingers in my mind even now. It was early morning, and the woods were still. A thick fog had settled in, so dense it clung to every tree, every rock, and every blade of grass, almost like it was alive. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and everything felt like it was shrouded in a dream. I had been hiking for a few hours, taking my time, enjoying the solitude of the trail. The quiet was almost too much, the kind of quiet where you start to hear things you know aren't really there. My footsteps were muffled by the fog, and even the birds had yet to wake up. It was one of those mornings where the world felt out of sync, like something wasn't quite right. The trail twisted ahead of me, disappearing into the mist like a path to nowhere. I kept my pace slow, as I usually did when hiking alone. There's something about being alone in the woods that makes you more aware of your surroundings, more sensitive to the smallest sounds, even to the lack of sounds. But this morning, the quiet was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that pressed in on you, like the world had stopped and everything was holding its breath. As I rounded a bend in the trail, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the fog, some strange shadow cast by a tree or a boulder. But then I saw it more clearly. There, standing directly in the middle of the trail, was a figure. Tall, shrouded in shadow, unmoving. It wasn't a person I recognized, and there was something unnatural about its stillness. I called out, my voice swallowed by the fog. "Hello? Is someone there?" My words barely made it past my lips before they were lost in the thick air. There was no response. No rustling of clothing, no movement. Nothing. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the figure. My heart rate picked up, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Instinctively, I took a small step back, my foot crunching softly on the wet ground. But still, the figure didn't move. I had this sudden, overwhelming urge to turn around and leave, but my feet felt frozen to the spot. It was as if my body was betraying me, holding me in place even though every part of my mind screamed at me to leave. I could feel my pulse in my ears, and the fog seemed to press in even tighter, making it harder to see clearly. The figure remained motionless, like it was waiting for something. It was too tall to be just a person, and the shape didn't make sense. It didn't have the usual features you'd expect in someone standing on a trail. There was no movement, no sign of life, just this looming shadow, as if it was some part of the woods itself. I forced myself to take another step back, but my feet didn't seem to want to listen. Every time I tried to move, it felt like I was rooted to the ground. Finally, I managed to break free of that frozen moment and took a hesitant step forward. My breathing quickened, and my eyes never left the figure. I had no reason to be this scared. Could have just been some guy out here, maybe a hiker who had stopped for a rest or was trying to get his bearings. But something about it didn't feel right. Something about the way the figure just stood there, so unnaturally still, made my instincts scream that this wasn't normal. Cleared my throat, trying again. "Hey, you okay?" My voice was shaking, and I could hear the nervousness in it, but still no answer. I thought maybe I should walk around the figure, try to pass by, but something stopped me. A gut feeling, a voice deep down that told me to stay put, that moving too quickly would make things worse. So I just stood there watching, and then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the figure started to move. At first, it was slow, almost too slow, like it was testing its own movement. The figure didn't seem to have a specific direction. It just began shifting toward me, one step at a time. I wanted to scream, to shout, to run, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't cooperate, and my heart was hammering in my chest. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I felt paralyzed. The figure's steps grew more deliberate, and I could hear the faint crunch of the wet ground beneath its feet, like a whispering echo. I was no longer frozen in place, but I couldn't bring myself to move. My breath hitched in my throat as the figure moved closer, step by slow step, and a cold dread started to creep up my spine. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't human, not in the way I understood humans. It moved like a person but felt wrong. Its shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally long, distorted by the fog, and I couldn't help but feel like it was coming for me. I don't know why I waited so long. Maybe I thought I'd see it more clearly, and maybe the fog would reveal something, anything that could explain it. Maybe I thought it would stop, turn around, and leave. But it didn't. The figure just kept coming, its pace picking up, getting faster. I snapped. Panic took over. I didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and ran. My feet pounded against the wet ground, the sound of my steps so loud in my own ears. I was running blindly, the trail a blur of mist and shadows, my heart slamming against my ribs. Every time I glanced behind me, I couldn't see it. The fog was too thick, the trees too close together. But I could hear it, right behind me. The footsteps, matching mine, the exact rhythm, the same speed, as if it was mirroring me, staying right on my tail. The air felt thick in my lungs, and each breath I took was harder than the last. My legs burned, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If I stopped, I didn't know what would happen. The trail twisted again, and I followed it without thinking, every instinct screaming at me to keep moving. It was like the forest itself was playing tricks on me, the fog warping and shifting, the trees seeming to close in around me. I kept glancing behind, and each time, the footsteps were there, just behind me, just close enough to make my blood run cold. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't in my head. I could hear it loud, clear, and real. But every time I tried to look, I couldn't see it. All I could do was hear it, like a shadow, just out of sight. I don't know how long I ran, but my legs were shaking, my lungs aching, and the fear clawing at my chest felt like it was suffocating me. My pace slowed, and I was gasping for air, but the figure was still there. Always behind me, always there, never stopping, never losing pace. Then, just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I broke free of the fog. The trees opened up, the mist thinning, and suddenly, I was in the clear. The trail widened, and I could see the world around me. The familiar shape of the trees, the brightening sky ahead. My breathing was ragged, and I dared not look back, but the footsteps stopped. The air felt different, less oppressive. I slowed, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. I stood there, frozen in the open space, heart hammering in my chest, my hands shaking. The woods around me felt normal again. The fog was gone, and everything seemed to be just as it should be. But the fear didn't fade. It lingered, a heavy weight on my shoulders, an unsettling feeling that I wasn't truly alone. I waited for a long time, listening, watching the woods around me. The silence was louder than before, and the sense of being watched never left me. But no figure appeared from the mist. No footsteps followed me out of the fog. It was just me, alone in the woods. I took a few steps forward, my legs feeling like lead, but the trail ahead seemed safe, normal, like nothing had ever happened. The woods had returned to their usual quiet, the kind of quiet I knew too well. The mist, the figure, the footsteps, they were all behind me now, but I would never forget it. I would never forget how it felt to be followed by something that wasn't supposed to be there, something that knew my every step, even when I couldn't see it. I've never hiked in that area alone since. The trail is still there, but the woods feel different now. That morning changed something inside me. The fear still lingers, like a shadow in the back of my mind. And every time I step into the woods, I wonder, what was that figure? Was it really there? Or was it something I imagined? I don't know, but I do know this. I'll never hike that trail alone again. I had been backpacking for 3 days, deep into a remote part of the woods where few people ventured. The kind of place where the trees grew thick and the only sounds were the calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. I'd made the decision to go off the beaten path, a little adventure to clear my mind, away from civilization and the noise of everyday life. The trail I had followed had gotten thinner and less marked as I pushed deeper, until I finally found a small clearing where I decided to set up camp for the night. The weather had been good during the day, clear skies and mild temperatures, but as evening fell, the wind began to pick up. It started as a soft breeze, but it didn't take long for it to grow into something stronger. The trees began to sway, their branches creaking and groaning under the pressure of the gusts. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and stoked the fire, watching the flames flicker in the growing wind. The sound of the fire crackling and the wind howling through the trees was a comforting, familiar noise. I had spent many nights in the woods before, but something about this night felt different. The woods were quiet in the moments between the gusts, and it was during one of those lulls that I first heard it, the faintest of whispers. At first, I thought it was just the wind, the branches rubbing together or the leaves stirring. I shrugged it off, but as the wind picked up again, I heard it more clearly, like someone speaking just beyond my reach. The voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, a soft whisper carried on the wind. I froze, straining my ears. It was just the wind, I told myself again, but the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. The whispering continued, and this time it sounded more distinct. It wasn't just random sounds. I could make out words, my name. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe the wind was playing tricks on me, carrying sounds from somewhere far away. But no, the whisper grew louder, and there it was again. My name, unmistakable. Hey, hey, come here. The voice was soft, almost coaxing, like it was trying to get my attention. I stood up from my seat by the fire, my heart pounding in my chest. The flames from the campfire flickered in the wind, casting erratic shadows around me. I scanned the darkness between the trees, my flashlight in hand. There was no one there, no one that I could see, at least. The shadows were deep, and the forest felt heavier somehow, like something was watching me from the darkness. The whispers continued, growing clearer, more insistent. Come here, come closer. The voice whispered again, but this time it was no longer a gentle call. It was more of a command. My blood ran cold as I felt the unmistakable sensation that someone, or something, was out there in the dark, speaking to me. My instincts screamed at me to get up, to grab my stuff and leave, but I couldn't move. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on me, watching from the trees. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. This wasn't normal. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I had been out here alone for days. Maybe it was just the isolation getting to me. But then the whisper turned into something else. A soft laugh, distant but unmistakable. It was a laugh that was not mine, not from anyone I knew. It echoed through the trees, almost mocking me. I shuddered. The hairs on my neck stood up even more. Then, as if the universe had decided to push me further into the nightmare, the laughter stopped, and in its place came shouting, angry, violent shouting. It was unintelligible at first, like a garbled mix of words, but I could hear the anger in it, the desperation. And through the shouting, I heard something else, movement. Something was crashing through the woods behind me. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but all I saw was the vast expanse of trees swaying in the wind. The sound of the crash was still ringing in my ears, though. It had been loud, like something or someone had just knocked over a tree or tripped over a large pile of debris. My heart began to race, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was it just an animal? No, this sounded too purposeful, too calculated. It didn't have the chaotic randomness of a bear or a deer. It was something else, something that wasn't supposed to be out there in the darkness with me. I grabbed my backpack, my flashlight trembling in my hand as I threw my things into it as fast as I could. I wasn't even thinking straight anymore, just moving on instinct, packing up my gear and preparing to leave. The whispers continued, but they were distorted now, like they were coming from different directions. My ears were ringing, and my mind was racing. What the hell was going on? I fumbled with the straps of my backpack, the weight of fear pressing down on me. I had to leave. I had to get back to my car, back to safety. Every sound in the woods seemed amplified now, every creak of the trees, every crack of a twig underfoot. My flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something move between the trees, just outside the range of the light. I couldn't tell what it was. I didn't want to know. I ran for it, grabbing my tent, shoving it into my pack. The whole time, the wind howled, the trees creaked, and the sound of the distant crash echoed in my mind. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I threw everything together. The shadows around me felt thicker now, more oppressive. My legs were moving without thinking, just putting one foot in front of the other as I stumbled through the woods, my eyes scanning every movement, every rustle. I didn't dare look back. The path to my car felt like miles, even though I knew it was only a few hundred yards away. My mind was consumed with panic, with the sounds of whispers, laughter, and angry shouts bouncing around in my head. The forest seemed to press in on me from all sides, the trees looming like silent witnesses to whatever was going on. I heard a snap behind me, too close, too loud. I turned, my flashlight darting in all directions, but again, there was nothing. I wasn't sure if I had just imagined it, but I wasn't going to take the chance. I pushed forward, faster now, my pulse pounding in my ears. The road was just ahead. I knew it was. I could see the faint outline of the trees thinning out, the edge of the woods where the car park was. Finally, I broke through the trees, my car just ahead of me. I didn't slow down. I fumbled with my keys, nearly dropping them as I unlocked the door and jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life as I slammed the car into gear and sped down the dirt road, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see something or someone following me. But there was nothing. The wind was still howling through the trees as I drove, but the further I got, the more the tension in my chest began to ease. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, where I found a gas station and parked in the lot, my hands still shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The darkness of the woods seemed to stretch out behind me, but I was no longer in it. I sat there for a long time, staring into the rearview mirror, expecting to see eyes or movement or something watching me. But there was nothing. That night, I drove straight home. I didn't stop, didn't look back, and I never went back into those woods. I couldn't explain what happened, but the fear I felt in those woods was real. Whatever it was, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, and I never would be again.